welcome to the Brownbread Mixtape!
Brownbread Mixtape.
Very true. So if I say brown, you say red. Brown, brown.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Brownbread Mixtape podcast. So this month, and for the next couple of months, we've got some really interesting shows for you. Really happy to share these with you actually. Eamonn McLoughlin has been putting together a documentary about performance poetry and writers who read their own work or perform their own work. And these shows that you're about to hear, this is the first of them, went out on Dublin City FM. And in each case, he interviewed three different writers or three different performers and took a different look at perhaps a different night or a different location for each one and sort of contextualised the performance poetry and performed work scene. So this first one we're going to listen to is centred around Seven Towers, which is a night I would dearly love to go to, but unfortunately it clashes with the Brownbread Mixtape. It's on the last Wednesday of the month. It's called Seven Towers, and you're going to hear in it interviews with Oran Ryan, Orla Martin and Maighread Medbh, all fantastic writers and all fantastic members of the burgeoning literary and performance scene that exists in Ireland at the moment. And again, just to give you context, Eamonn put these together himself with the help of the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland. So after my little intro here, you'll hear his intro and the show itself. And I have to say, it's a really fascinating piece. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'm really glad that we could share it with you. Thanks.
This is Eamonn McLoughlin for Dublin City FM with Voices in the Wilderness, a 6x1 hour documentary series about performance poets and writers who perform their own work. The spoken word scene, although underground, is thriving with a new generation of poets taking crowds by storm. This week I'm going to Seven Towers Publishing House, which gives readings predominantly in the Twisted Pepper on Abbey Street. I'll be talking to writer and co-founder of the publishing house, Oran Ryan. Also, I'll be talking to poets Maighread Medbh and Orla Martin. Maighread has been described as the grand dame of Dublin's performance poets, and Orla organises her own spoken word event, also in the Twisted Pepper. Music is by Fia Rua and Ellie McMahon, but first it's Oren Ryan.
Way back in 2005, if you remember what I was saying about Sarah encouraging me to write, she encouraged me very strongly to write, so I did. I started writing drafts of a novel that eventually became The Death of Finn. I wanted to kind of make the book a kind of a commemoration and a sort of an act of love, and it's dedicated to the guy. Once I had that story, I had the novel. So I started shopping it around, naturally, with Sarah's help. She has a lot of experience in publishing and so on and so forth. And it was more or less accepted. Negotiations were continuing. And at the very last minute, the publisher pulled out, which was very, very difficult, very tough. So Sarah came up with the idea, why don't we do it ourselves? I mean, this is a good book, and, I'm very keen on publishing. I'm very interested in getting into publishing, and I have a lot of experience publishing. And I said, well, I have no experience publishing. She says, not to worry, we'll work something out. So we got some friends in, and they were very keen on the idea, and that's how Seven Towers started off. And we published, Death of Finn did well. We published a few others.
So how did it become a poetry-based publication or publishing house?
Ireland has many, many, many poets, and many of them are excellent. So we kind of put out, initially what we did was we put out a call for submissions. The vast majority of the submissions were poetry. It was just phenomenal. So eventually what we did was we stopped accepting submissions kind of directly. So we started doing gigs, poetry readings and prose readings. But I mean, the thing about it is that Seven Towers is as open to prose, experimental prose, plays, novels, as it is to poetry. It's simply based on what we're attracted to, what we think is of real lasting quality. What we're looking for is work that will stand the test of time.
After the train killed me, I was resurrected. Technically, I was dead. I saw myself dead, but I was alive, corporeal, looking on. I was there. Being there changed everything. I lived in a new world order. My old life was gone. All those details, the memories of life, the well-trained battalions of knowledge and well-founded habits and prejudices, gone after the smash of train kill. I thought about the beginning of everything. In the beginning, there came the facts. And the facts, they somehow killed us. In the beginning, we were born. We join the suicide ranks of time and we somehow live. But it's not true. It's not true because there is no true. In the beginning, we are born. We live, if we can. We die, then reinvent ourselves. There's only time as the bomb clock starts ticking. In the beginning, spirits from surreality haunted the wide-open spaces of our vacuous cosmos, and these are the last voices, mine and yours, the last you will ever hear in this life, this terminal engine. Hear the whispers of the bones, the hum, the whisper of breathing heartbeats, of whispering winds in the tubercular tunnels. Always had a deep respect for the music of time. Before death took me and set me free to live, this is what happened. That was the overture. This is the story.
But Sarah is very much a visionary as well. Like an awful lot of what the initial founding of Seven Towers was her idea. You know, like sometimes I'm in awe of the things that she comes up with to solve very complex creative problems. Yeah, Lundberg is a Swedish name. She's of Swedish extraction. But very much a Dubliner, as am I.
So tell us about the readings you used to do and how it's all changed and what's in the future.
Right. We do one reading in the Hammersmith Ram in London once a month. We do one in New York every last Wednesday. The wonderful, wonderful Liz McSkeen is going over to New York with a bunch of censuses. And she's doing a few readings, and she's going over to Rocky Sullivan's. It's a cool place. It's a restaurant, it's a bar, and it's a kind of a gig centre. You know, Marlon Brando's on the waterfront. It's right beside there. So we just happened upon it. We occasionally travel around Ireland and do gigs and readings. Kerry, Galway, do a few around Dublin. Particularly in the Twisted Pepper. We do an awful lot in the Twisted Pepper. One of the things we're doing now is we do a kind of an independent bookmarked, like an awful lot of our pals and colleagues who are in other smaller publishing houses. That, again, it's the whole kind of consciousness raising that smaller publishers produce top-notch books. Excellent books, as good as anywhere else. And what we do is that they send us and they give us samples of the books, and writers come in and they give us samples of their books. We're selling them, and we take a small sum for our own expenses, and we give most of it to the authors. They get like 90% of the whatever we. I mean, like these guys are you know, these need the money. They need to continue to. It's the whole thing. Like, you know, writers. People need to be paid. They need to be shown the value of their work. So that's what we do. So it's like every second Thursday, the Twisted Pepper, Middle Abbey Street, a cool place. And they've given us the lower floor for free. So we're going to spread out a whole lot of books. We're getting a bunch of writers and poets in, and we'll be there from say 6:30 to about 8:30, 9. And you can have coffee and drinks upstairs. You can bring it down. And it's mostly a kind of a, like, people listen to the work, but it's the main element of it is it's a social, it's kind of a get-together, a social experience. And that's how these things run. That's why these things continue to survive. You know, it's where writers can kind of hang out and just have a good time, read their work, chat, buy a few books, and go home. You know, that's
come back again.
And come back again. Well, that's the hope. The big plan is that they come back. You know, y'all come back now.
It comes across to me it's a labour of love. If you take such a small cut, then it really is like a vocation then, in a way.
It is, absolutely. I mean, you couldn't do... You would have to love what you do. But again, like, there's nothing quite like, getting a manuscript and you start reading it and you say, this is wonderful. This is just so good. You know, it would be so cool to make a book of this.
Though I have little talent for friendship, I once was a friend of Joseph Pinker's. Successful and brilliant and irrevocably alone, Pinker's made a religion of intimacy in the way only the lonely could. Pinker's, the perfect academic machine, utterly dedicated to self-advancement, rose through the academic ranks of the English department like a force of nature few could resist. Established early in his career with a series of groundbreaking articles on Samuel Beckett, he followed them with a singularly beautiful collection of stories about people and buildings, some of which had been published in the New Yorker just before he got tenure. Then came professorship. He knew he had arrived. Talented, charming, articulate, moneyed, successful, I was bitterly jealous of him. By comparison, I was a non-entity. I luxuriated in my unhappiness. I was talentless, abrupt, nervously tongue-tied, an unsnappy dresser, girl-friend-less, a common or garden failure. Suffused in the neurotic knowledge of my own non-entity, I and Joe rarely neglected to pay me the compliment of his company. I basked in the iridescent glow of his magnificent, impenetrable, urbane, knowledgeable sociability. My fear and self-dislike worshipped at the altar of his posturing at intimacy. I remained in awe at his talent for making alliances and social contacts feel like lifelong friends that loved one another. I'm sure that they still call regularly to see him when he's at home.
You really learn an awful lot about writing, working with writers. So
Can it be a difficult process?
It can be, like writers, being one myself, writers can be very difficult. But what helps you through that phase is, one, if you become friends with the writer, which I have on many occasions, like many of these chaps I'm talking about are very close personal friends of mine. So, whether or not there are differences of opinion, and in many ways it's important that there are marked differences of opinion, because things get trashed out, and possible difficulties that might occur down the road after the book is finished, if either side is simply agreeing for the sake of agreeing or agreeing for the sake of getting the book out, that can be very bad for the book itself, and bad for the publisher and bad for the author. And what's bad for the author is bad for the publisher, because you want the best possible book you can get in that particular instance to come out. I'm immensely lucky to be married to someone who is just such a superb editor. And I remember when I was particularly with my second novel, 10 Short Novels by Arthur Kruger, we went through many drafts of that book. And it was a very big book. And it was incredibly painful to go through those. It was, we were discussing and debating so much, it was, heartbreakingly difficult. But what made it worthwhile in the end was that the book itself turned out a very solid piece of work, and that was five or 6 years ago now. And I can still pick up any part of that book for any particular reading and still read it, and I'm not going to get any frights, because every single word has been as carefully worked out as we possibly could at the time. If you really don't agree with what your editor or your proofreader was saying, it is very important you sort of argue it out very carefully, you know? And that takes as long as it takes, you know? Like I've seen discussions about the design and structure of a book go on for a year, you know? 3, 4, 5, 6 versions of how do you want this structured, how do you want this to look, go on and on and on, and it has to, until something suitable emerges from and that's part of the creative process, like changing a manuscript into a book. In some ways, two very different things. In many ways, any writer or publisher would tell you that. I'm actually in the process of putting up a newfangled shop off the Seven Towers website, which will go online very soon. It's you can put all the books are there on Seven Towers website, and you'll get them in a flash. And we're putting up ebooks as well for all the books we've brought out since the very beginning. New versions of ebooks, because that's the way things are going.
How important do you think the whole spoken word scene is in Dublin?
I think it's a crucial thing on so many levels. The only way you will know if your work is having any effect is if you manage to communicate it. So spoken word is one of the ways of doing it. It's a profound way of seeing how you are communicating as an artist and what is not working. So it serves as an editorial and an act of communication. It is crucial to any artist to show your work, to perform your work, to see your work performed. So the spoken word scene is it's intrinsic to any writing venture, and it's one of the reasons why Seven Towers and I am so involved in all of these kinds of things. So when I actually started off back in I was very shy. First of all, found it very difficult to stand up in front of a crowd. And the first time I did a reading, I actually didn't sleep for 2 nights. I was so terrified. But once I did my first reading here in the Irish Writers' Centre, actually. I read a section of The Death of Finn, I think, and had a bottle of wine especially reserved for myself, which I then drank afterwards, just for sheer relief of having done the reading. But it changed me. I knew that this was really important. And friends who are writers were telling me, you know, you have to read your work. So any writer will tell you what I've just said. And the more different types of readings, that's one of the things that, you know, I like about the scene, is there are so many different types of reading with so many different styles, some more formal than others, so, some dealing with the more kind of experimental end of some rap and so on and so forth, some with music, you know, words spoken with music, and the more the better. It sort of expands the kind of throughput of how language is being used. And in the last 10 years or so, there has been an explosion of readings of all different types. And we're getting more and more writers coming over to read, like Seven Towers. We get people from France and Italy, and a lot of guys from New York and the States. Or if they're passing through, they will stop by, you know, and we'll if they want to do a reading with us, we'll find some way of fitting them in and make sure that they get a slot. We had a few years back, we had some Lithuanian poets. It's extraordinary, the scene in Lithuania. Lithuanian poets are like rock stars. They have followings that go from place to place. You know, if you were to see them, like they're like with the shades, and they're like rock stars. They're poetry, and there's a big poetry scene in Lithuania. Like it's a huge part of their culture. You know, so there you go. It's, I couldn't say enough good things about the writing scene and the reading scene, as they say. And
how do you find the audiences at these readings?
Excellent. I never had an issue with them. Oh, I do remember one, but he was asked politely to leave. I was actually here. We had a kind of an hour long reading, and someone came in off the street, and he was drunk, and he was out the back. And as soon as one of the writers had finished, I think a couple of people went down immediately and just sort of quietly asked him to go. But that's been my only experience, which generally, with that exception, people don't come to these things to heckle, really. They just wouldn't enter their minds. There'd be no point. Like, why would you come to a poetry reading to heckle it? It's pointless,
So would you encourage listeners to attend these readings?
Yep. If they feel so moved, absolutely. Basically, you can come, and there's no onus on you to do anything other than enjoy yourself. And with Seven Towers events, and I think with most of the events, you can come and go as you please, and we say that to them. And I think that's one of the reasons why people come back, because they're made very welcome, and they genuinely are very welcome, and there's no onus or pressure on them to sort of have to sit there if they be somewhere else. There's no problem at all, And the atmosphere is very friendly,
Well, the river flows under the ground, right below our toes. It's taken all the sins of man and troubles and our woes. Flow, river, flow, river, flow. With the rains, the water rise, stagger, deeper, stronger. The melted snow falls down below and it splashes as it goes. Flow, river, flow, river, flow. Ain't see it coming to the ground like centuries before. It's shaking mud and spreading blood. Flow, river, flow, river, flow, river, flow, river, flow, river, flow. I'd like to spread my body out in the morning, dissolve into you without a warning. It's been a heavy year, a heavy season. So take me where you're going, don't be teasing. I'd like to spread my body out in the morning, dissolve into you without a warning. It's been a heavy year, a heavy season. Take me where you're going. Well, the river flows under the ground, right below our toes. It's taken all the sins of man and troubles and our woes. Flow, river, flow, river, flow, river, flow, river. Hey!
That was Fia Rua. Next, it's Maighread Medbh.
Well, I can't tell you why I became a poet, actually. I really don't know. I can only tell you how it manifested itself over the years, slowly, as many things manifest themselves in me, and with really stopping and starting, or rather without form, because even though I love form in poetry, in many ways my life is without form. But I think it probably started when I would... Well, took a book of plays out the back at home and performed them in the shed. And then later on just wanted to write poems. And well, first of all, I was performing poems, I think, before I wrote them. I liked to recite them. I liked to live in the words. And then in my teens, I started to write poems. I told my brother one day as he was out at the gable end cutting logs for the fire, and he says, "Oh yes," he said, "chop. I used to write poems, but I destroyed them all. They were only silly." So I nodded my head and went back in and burnt all my poems. So then later I wrote a reasonably good love poem, and then wrote a reasonably good sort of rompy sort of poem, and always knew I wanted to write. And it went into abeyance somewhat because I had to get away from home, number one, and I had to earn a living. And I studied, I did a degree. While I was doing a degree, I didn't write, but writing was just always there. And actually, I don't think it mattered what I was writing. I don't think it still matters that much what I'm writing, as long as I'm writing. So I came back to poetry in my late 20s, joined a poetry workshop here in Dublin, and Dublin Writers' Workshop, which was buzzing at the time with all sorts of interesting people, very diverse. They're all in the first two anthologies that we brought out, Between the Circus and the Sewer and Edible Houses were our anthologies. And it was fantastic, almost surreal stuff. Then we had the people in Wild Honey Press came and went there. Eamon Linsky was there at that time. A lot of people. There was a lot of energy. And I suppose I never looked back after that then, after the anthology and after getting a good review I wrote my first collection, and that was The Making of a Pagan. So I then went into performance poetry. But of course I had worked in theatre before, amateur theatre. I liked performing originally. I never thought I wanted to be anything. I just wanted to do things. I wanted to act. So I had dramatic experience. I trained in drama. So it was quite natural for me when I got up to read a poem to be to some extent dramatic, and then the next step was to throw the book away. But even though I had actually been on stage, it was quite a big thing to throw the book away, because this was not getting into character as such. In a way it was, because often when you're producing poems, it's hard to locate an I in a way. I mean, all the phenomenologists say this, all the psychologists and neuroscientists say this. You don't locate an I, you're always fragmented somehow. But at the same time, there is that sense of the self. So you get up and you throw the book away and you feel somehow naked, because this is your intellectual work. This is your own work. And it does feel like nakedness at the beginning. So really the only thing, the fundamental thing that helps you to overcome it is discipline and practice. So basically you're rehearsed very well. You imagine yourself, visualise yourself and visualise your performance before the event. And the greater the preparation, then the greater the performance. The other thing is you think about the words. And I think that's the fundamental key, as well as rehearsal. When you're up there, it's not about you. It's about your words. It's about the poem. You have to have technique. Actually, I've seen some performance poets fall down on that because their emphasis isn't right. They don't vary emphasis. They probably are not still enough on stage, not controlled enough on stage, so they're losing a lot of power. Also, they may not be focusing enough on the quality of the text. Now, I don't think I focused enough on the quality of the text in many of my pieces in the early days either. Poetry for me has always been about the poem, the integrity of trying to express your experience of life in a form that's appropriate to it. What we're trying to do is, as I say, communicate as organically as possible. Poetry has always been about that. Performance poetry seems to be an extension of that. But it's not always. It's hard work to keep it as an extension of that, because the text has to have quality. And then maybe sometimes you have to say, look, I'm not performing anymore, or this is not to be performed, or this is to be read, or I have to find a completely different way of performing this. It's not all movement. Sometimes maybe you've got to lie on the ground and perform it, and sometimes somebody else would be better to speak it. Before. It's night in the garden, and the scent of jasmine bleeds heavy down the trees, sick from the day's swollen heat. The skin burns, but a cold current snakes up from the earth and seeps through the ankles, lining the long journey of bone that must walk. Must. She stretched on the reposing ground, with a stone in her belly that fell from the far stars bearing their history. She inhales and finds her breath snarled to a hammer, pounding on the crux of tomorrow, its mountain, rehearsing each upward step and slip, and knows she will do it, yes. She will push the boulder from the entrance again, and then again, until silence is the sight and sound of her heart, and her rented garden withers in the gapped memory of the laughing race. She must kneel, though every organ and subatomic labourer says stop, pipes the march of the ego, sings the song of moment, and her limbs, glorious on the inside, black widow treacherous. You can be, they intone, the killer and not the dead. But there's a place of bliss, she says, and tastes the grass, where the generous go. Embrace happens there, and fingers lace themselves artfully, and bodies dissolve in the sweet unity of the right thing. I picture myself at the gate, ticketless. Only she and the jasmine know this, and the jasmine will tell, because scent and long fingers make the earth deliver. She rolls onto that stony belly and forces her knees to fold. All tomorrows, till sunburst, unwell and inward. Hello.
So what kind of poems, what kind of themes would you say explore?
Mostly me, but not just in the context often of politics. I wrote a lot of political poetry to begin with. It was the early 90s. There was no freedom of speech. Northern Ireland was in a pretty violent state. It seemed necessary to do something. And also I gave up work when I got pregnant, which didn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but I didn't want to continue in the job. So I was on the dole, so I had some mobility. And with my partner, we went to Belfast and lived there for a year. So I had to be political in Belfast, I suppose, but it was feminist politics as well as nationalist politics. And it was nationalist to the degree that I thought that the South were ignoring the plight of the nationalists in Northern Ireland. We liked to pretend they weren't there. Poets a lot of Irish poets, and there were a few who didn't, weren't like this, but quite a lot of high-profile Irish poets would attack the IRA, but they wouldn't attack the UDA or the UVF, and there was this constant distancing themselves from the violence. Oh, no, we don't want to be in any way associated with this, whatever our politics. And a lot of that was fear. I've never been able to condemn anybody, I suppose, but I don't condemn people who feel that violence is the only option in a situation of very bad political and social abuse, which was the situation in the North. On the other hand, any violent organisation is very, very dangerous, and I would not want to get involved with the IRA any more than I would want to get involved with the British Army. The thing is, you can't condemn. I don't feel you can. I write about experience, my experience. I write about love and the inability to love. I write about isolation. It's stories as well. I suppose I've written a lot of stories. I observe people and I write their stories because I'm getting into somebody else's mind to some degree. So a lot of my poems just describe people. There was another one I wrote about a woman who didn't grow up, and she's a real person who was Actually, no. I saw a child. As I was going home one day, there was a child on the side of the road and staring at me with that sort of manic attention a child can give you sometimes, with the head down and the eyes, fixed on you. And she could just as easily have been in a mental asylum. So as I walked past, I kind of thought, yeah, I know people. Supposing she never grew up. Supposing she stayed that way. Supposing she was still staring at me like that when she was 60. Right? It's sane now that she does it. She's quite sane as a child. But if she was age 60 and she was still doing that, she'd be insane, wouldn't she? So I wrote a poem sort of based around that idea, and then connected it with my uncle. My uncle, who used to be so exciting, turned out he was later diagnosed as being manic depressive, but so many of the family would, he was just Uncle Cherry, and he'd arrived out in Newcastle West, which was not quite the back of nowhere, but it was a pretty small town, and he would arrive down with shirt tails flailing in this car that Fable had he made himself, because he was a mechanic and he was quite a genius with his hands, and he had an open roof. It had a sunroof, and of course nobody in Newcastle West had seen the like, so we would be hanging out of the sunroof, and there was a woman whose life had frozen in time. And it had frozen in time, frozen at the point where her uncle used to come and take her out in the car and take her to pubs with him and give her beautiful dolls. And that was what life meant. And when that went, there was no life. So she ended up staring at people out on the road and like a little kid, and living in a little flat and drawing pictures in crayons and putting them on the wall. And who's to say that isn't alive? On the lighter issue, with all of my performances, one of my rules, I think I may have broken this recently, but one of my rules has always been to do a sex poem. So while it may not be, and usually they're slightly funny. Not always, but at least there's a certain amount of pleasure being had. So let's not say that I'm totally anhedonic. Saturday morning, underneath blankets, and someone agrees with your pleasure principle. Pampers your stomach with baby kisses, your pink parts sucked and singing. Better in the dark, where you couldn't look down and see your legs, not fifers, more badly mashed spuds, crinkling at the horizon or where the mattress spreads them. Better not seeing his face to remember your eyes don't meet, they avoid. Better not having to think again how distant you are, and not the yolk and white except of a too thinly fried egg. Let your skin think for itself, that in another age you wouldn't wish for any more than a good man who'd stroke you, who'd bring back the kill which you'd gut and garnish, could do worse than this. Then the blankets are off, and doing it doggy style, your stomach goes like someone took a fork and finished off the look of a heap of mash. The skin runs from side to side like a manic patch of sea. You try to adopt a position that stops it. Wonder if a little more calinetics would make you taut. Wonder if he minds the spud look. He is so patriotic. And it is because you bore the children, fluid with maternal solicitude. Could do worse than this. Except when the push is on, you remember those lesbians you refused, who cackle in your lost opportunity space. When it comes to the skin, everything is an affair. It's surprisingly, I'm not a scene person at all. I've never really been a scene person. I kind of go into my little hut and then come out every so often and perform. Kit Fry is fantastic, the way she has organised events. Also, K44 and Raven and several other people, several Dublin people whom I don't know very well but have seen perform, are actually very, very interesting and, again, very passionate. So it seems to me that the scene is buzzing, which is great. But I think what's important, first and foremost, what has always been important about poetry is that some people are prepared to spend enough time alone to do it. And that always seems to be inspirational for other people, because we're in this constant dialectic between the individual and society, and that some people will simply be or try to be or contact the elemental self is really important. That they will then communicate it is even more important. So on that level, that's always important. But for a community, for people to be able to walk into a venue where other people are presenting their works of art, good, bad or indifferent, but they are works that they have applied energy to, and many of them are works of art. That they're easily available is essential, because you can be so starved of contact, of real communication. But to feel it vibrant, to feel the bodies there, a packed room full of eager, passionate people who want to communicate, is an experience that's quite different from a book. Not better or worse, but it's quite different. It is that immediate connection that you're getting, and to have that readily available, I think, is the best form of mental health you're going to find.
Ellie McLoughlin and Conor McMahon, no relation, just in case anybody catches kissing later on.
That was Ellie McMahon and Conor McMahon, no relation of course. Next, it's Orla Martin.
Well, I've been writing poetry since I was about 8 or 9, I suppose, and I would have studied English, like I did a degree in English and an MA in French, and it's something that chases you. You don't choose poetry, it kind of chooses you. So over the years, I've pretty much always gone back to it like a very solid husband, even though I've kind of gone off and flirted with other things. I've written short stories and I play guitar and I write songs, but I think poetry is like that dependable husband I'll always go back to at the end of the day. Writing is work. Anybody who has written poetry or short stories for a long time will tell you it's hard work, it's graft. Performing is something very, very different. It's kind of like catharsis sometimes. So you have the experience of actually sharing this with people, and speaking it out loud, especially in front of people who are interested in poetry, can also be very, very interesting. But I think that the art of performing is really, really important. And I've been to some dreadful poetry readings where people, maybe they haven't got the training or they don't have the confidence, don't speak into the mic properly, they hide their faces, and they make what is something very, very beautiful become very, very boring. So I think it's very, very important for poets to know how to read properly and how to engage an audience, so that you can be creating something wonderful and that can also be entertaining and engaging. The open mic that I run, the Muse Open Mic, would be attended by other poets, obviously, musicians, actors. There are a lot of other people who run open mics in Dublin, like Raven and Cliff run the Tongue Box up in the Cobblestone. Stephen James Smith had run Glore for years. Sarah and Oren have been doing the Seven Towers as well, last Wednesday series. So other people who run other events obviously come along to support it. There's a really incredible number of people who love actually just going and attending these readings, because it is something it's different to do. Instead of sitting at home watching television, you can go out to an event that's actually free of charge and listen to some interesting performances. So yeah, different types of people.
How would you describe your own style of poetry?
Quirky and offbeat, I think, would probably best describe what I write. Now, I write songs too, so that would apply more to lyrics. But Europa, the one that you'd mentioned, it's written about one of Jupiter's moons, and it was nominated, it was commended at the Jonathan Swift Award last December. It came third in the Francis Ledwich Poetry Prize, I think 2010. So that poem has done well for me, even though it's a bit out. You do need the Hubble telescope to kind of see it. Like, it is a bit out there, but that's just the stuff I write. Jovian, you call me Jovian. I am Europa. Look at him, Jupiter, that oblate buffoon, all gas and storm and bulging equator. Still, he tidal locks me, hula hoops and spins me. Sentenced I am to orbit this path with those jumped up asteroids, Ganymede, Callisto and Io, crater-faced Io, belching of magma and stinking of sulphur. Get out of my path. Oh, the solar winds may blow, but my ice complexion is smooth, and I have been discovered by Galileo, photographed by Voyager. For I am not a moon, I am a star. I am Europa. Recently, I have been quite inspired by what's been going on in the country, since we've been in a recession since September 2008. So I do think it's profoundly more engaging what's going on in Ireland than what's going on in my own head, or, where I live in Cork Street, or my own life. So, I think the more mature I become, the less I write about myself. I would hope. And then again, you just fall back to those old chestnuts where you just write about relationships, which every single poet out there does. So, yeah. My lyrics are, I'd say, sort of slightly Radiohead meets Phoebe Buffay type of thing. Like, they are kind of quite serious, but they are very, very offbeat. I'd actually last year won the NUIG Tower of Song competition with a song called P45. I do like writing songs about politics. Like, I'd finished a song for the last open mic called Strawberry Smile, and it was inspired by Enda Kenny. So, I write lots of different stuff, and the inspiration comes from all types of places, even in the colour of Enda Kenny's hair. Yeah.
Enda with that strawberry smile, should we hang out her brightest colours? Hey, Enda with that strawberry smile, should we hang out her brightest colours? Blue sky thinking, cloud computing, Guinness with Obama and dinner with Clinton. A new horizon for our tomorrow, may just decrease our cost to borrow.
The first open mic I ran was December 2006, and it was with the Rathmines Writers Group. It's a group who are really, really supportive of me, and I've been with on and off over the years. And I ran them in the Winding Stair Bookshop on Ormond Quay. So I tend to do about 2 every year or so. If you're committing to maybe once a month, it becomes a huge job to get performers in. So it keeps it very, very fresh for me if I just do it probably twice a year. And the manager there, Regan Hutchins, was fantastic. He was so supportive. So I started an MA about 2 years ago, and I obviously through other time commitments couldn't actually run anymore. So when I went back to do them again, Regan had unfortunately left the Winding Stair, so I thought, well, it's time maybe I should look at a different venue. And when I met Rob, I could tell that we had a very similar mindset, and he was really, really supportive of the arts. Plus, the Loft Bookshop is a fantastic bookshop. I also quite like the idea of doing a reading in somewhere that's different than a pub. Like in the Winding Stairs, we had a bring your own bottle. Here, there's a fantastic bar downstairs. People can go downstairs and bring a glass of wine and come up and listen to the poetry. So I do really, really think it's a good symbiosis to have these types of literary events in a bookshop. And Rob is very, very supportive of the arts. He really is.
Like, how many different groups of poets would you have reading here?
So far, so the shop's only been open 10 months so far. So we've had Orla's Night, we've had the Muse open mic, we've had Kit Fries and Vermin Apfel. They do pretty regular poetry nights here. They'll either be similarly like theme poetry nights or open mic poetry nights. Seven Towers have done several lunchtime readings here, because Seven Towers do multiple readings over a month. They've done lunchtime readings in the shop, and then they've done other evening time readings. They have their last Wednesday series, which is downstairs elsewhere in the building. We've also had Big Smoke Writing Factory, had a lit cafe here before Christmas, which went really, really well. Sorry, was it before Christmas or after Christmas? It was around Christmas. There's a really great small group of young Irish writers and performers connected with an Irish writer called Graham Tugwell, and they call themselves the Risky Proximity Players, and they're absolutely brilliant. Graham writes these incredibly weird and twisted and fantastic kind of horror stories, and they've had 2 nights here and they've both been really well attended, and they've done really, really well. Yeah, we had an M.R. James show here in October, and yeah, I mean the shop is small. The shop is it's modest in size, and we ran the Ghost Story show for 4 nights, and I think it was the second or third night the place was packed, and just the heat was ungodly. And I just remember Robert Lloyd Parry, who is the incredibly talented gentleman who does this amazing M.R. James Ghost Story. He literally performs these ghost stories as M.R. James, who is a kind of a turn of the century English ghost story writer. He's quite well known, and I just remember standing back in my light shirt, really, really sweating, and just feeling so sorry for Robert, because there he was on stage in a full heavy 3-piece woolen suit and just soldiering on and delivering this brilliant performance. So do you know what that shows as well? Is it shows you the enthusiasm of the people who come to these things, their willingness to. No one complained, and anytime performers mention it, they mention it in passing, and they mention it in a humorous fashion. I think that's another reason that I wanted to do events here, and that when people came to me, I mean I didn't actively go seeking events. I think people came to me and said, would you be interested in, we'd like to do this event, and Orla came and said, I do my open mic, can I come and do it here? And I was like, yeah, absolutely you can, because in this building you have cafe, bookstore, barbershop, vinyl shop by day, and that's something that we're all, I mean Trev, who runs the Pepper, runs a Twisted Pepper, and the George Bernard Shaw, is all into experimenting and trying new things. So what's going on in here isn't really going on anywhere else in Dublin.
So how important are open mics to developing poets?
Well, the open mic provides quite a useful platform for poets or any types of performers to break in new work. It's one thing sitting at home writing something or even practicing something or playing a song in front of people that you know, but to take it to an audience and to bring it outside of its comfort zone, then you really, really see whether it's something that can work, if it needs editing, or if it just dies a death. So in terms of working new material, it's a really, really interesting format. Poets, there are a lot of fantastic workshops that are on all over Dublin, all over Ireland, for all types of writers. And they work really, really well on the written level, or if you want to work on something in order to get it published. But to perform something, so you need that live experience where you have an audience and you get up there as a performer and you either make your mistake or it goes really well, or you realise that the song is too short, or the poem needs to be edited, or maybe it just needs a little bit more time. So in terms of developing work, it's really, really important for performers to just break in those new poems. But just going back to what Rob had said about admission and commoditizing the arts, because a lot of the time what people are performing it hasn't been tried and tested, it's not finished. I think that makes the open mic a slightly different type of an event to, I don't know, you buy your tickets to go and see Florence and the Machine. That's a whole other level. But what you're seeing is sort of slightly unfinished work. So it's not quite there. So yeah, don't charge. There's a really thriving open mic scene in Dublin, and we'd kind of all go and support one another's gigs or perform one another's gigs. Like I've done performances at the Tongue Box. Raven and Cliff have come down, who run the Tongue Box, have come and performed at my event. Oren and Sarah and all the people from the Seven Towers have been really, really supportive of my gig, and I'd go and attend theirs. So it's a really endearing, slightly dysfunctional community of people who go around and support one another. So when you're planning an open mic, you have to get out the calendar for the next 6 months, try and find out what's on where, and make sure that your event does not clash with one of the many, many events that are on in Dublin, because there's the Brownbread Mixtape as well that's more multidisciplinary. There's a little bit of an overlap, and there are only so many people in Dublin who will attend these things. And you also have so much competition because there's so much fabulous cultural stuff every night of the week on in Dublin. So being a huge part of running the open mics is knowing quite a lot about marketing and scheduling if you want to get people in the door, if you want to get good people in the door as well, if you want to get a bit of an audience. So scheduling is really, really important. Mine worked okay because it was mid-month. An awful lot of the open mics tend to run, they're either the first Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or the last Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of the month, or that type of stuff. So yeah, planning is very important. It's not possible to run any organisation or event or business without the support of your chosen few or your inner circle, or like in my case it would have been my close friends and my family. The Muse Open Mic is very much a family affair because my sister was over from San Diego and she sang at one of the events a couple of years ago. But my mum, who is a director and also an actor, sometimes does use the open mic to workshop some of her performances that she's doing. Like she was at the Patrick Kavanagh weekend last year and she performed some pieces by Kavanagh from, I think it was the Green Fool. Oh, she's going to kill me if I can't remember what it was. So the open mic was on in August, and she actually workshopped one of the pieces that she was doing for the Kavanagh weekend, which was fantastic. But she also did, one of the favourite pieces that she performed was a Percy French poem, which was absolutely fantastic. And a lot of people wouldn't be terribly familiar with Percy French. So she's always a welcome act, to be honest. And that's not just nepotism, like she is actually she's a great actor as well. So it is kind of great to rope in your nearest and dearest, even if they are just manning the door or if they're actually getting up and performing.
That's it for this week. Next week I'm going to the Brownbread Mixtape in the Stag's Head, and it's probably the loudest and rowdiest venue in the whole spoken word scene. See you then, same time, same place. This is Eamonn McLoughlin for Dublin City FM.
So if I say brown, you say bread.